Okay, so now we're going to add a global squash and stretch control to this head at the basic level of the skin cluster. So if we look here, what we're basically going to do, let me clear these channels out, is using the scale channels of this first head joint. We're going to add a volume preserving scale control to this head. But one thing we want to deal with is, because this base head joint is not centered within the volume of the head, I'm going to create a secondary scale control joint that will have the same scale axis as that head 01 joint. So I'm going to simply duplicate this joint, edit, duplicate. We can get rid of all the extraneous duplicate nodes, and then I'm going to rename this from head 01JNT1 to just head underscore SCL for scale. I'm going to switch to a side view and then move the scale joint down so that it is more or less in the center of the head mass. Okay, so now with that done, I'm going to parent this new scale joint beneath the head 01 joint. Just middle mouse drag and drop that. And then take the remaining head and ear joints and then parent those to this new head scale joint. So our new hierarchy is the head 01 joint, then the head scale joint, then the head 02, and left and right ear joints emanating from that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a multiply divide node, but set to the divide operator to take the z-axis scale, the forward and back scale of this head 01 joint, which will be the main controller that an animator will grab, and apply that inverse scale to the head scale joint. Let's open up our script editor, clear it out. I'm going to create a multiply divide node, create node, multiply divide, minus n argument to give it a name, K01, head scale, MD. Okay, so with this multiply divide node selected, I'm going to first change the operator from multiply to divide. And then with the multiply divide node still selected, I'm going to select Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor. Load the multiply divide node into the inputs. Open up the input 2. Select the head 01 joint, load that into the outputs, and scroll down and expand the scale channels. So I'm only going to connect one channel here, the scale Z of the head 01 joint to the input 2Z of the multiply divide node. I'm going to select the multiply divide node, load that into the outputs of the connection editor, expand the outputs, then select the head scale joint and load that into the inputs of the connection editor. So now I'm going to connect the output Z to the scale X and Y. So here we can see something pretty bad has happened to the head here. We actually have scales of 0 on the X and Y channels. So what we need to do, one last step, is select our multiply divide node, our head scale multiply divide node in the channel box. I'm going to set all of the input 1 X, Y, and Z channels, set their value to 1. So now what we're going to do is, if we look at the let's open up the attribute editor here and copy this tab. So if we look at these scale channels on the head scale joint, they are inverse of the scale channels on the head scale joint. So for instance, if we go 0.5 or 0.5, that's 1 over 0.5, which is 2. So our scale is set to 2. If we set this to 2, that's 1 over 2, which is 0.5. So we have 1 over 2. So this is what we get with that control. Just on the skin cluster level, we can see a squash and stretch occurring, but we're getting some distortion here. Now if we look here, I can see that we need to do one more thing. I'm going to select the head scale joint. Actually, let's scale it out here. We need to set the head scale joint and disable one of the parameters to allow the scale to propagate all the way through the child joints of this head scale joint. So with that head scale joint selected, I'm going to open the attribute editor. And in the joint frame, there's a segment scale compensate attribute that's set to on. We deselect that or disable that, we can see that now our head scale behaves in a way where the scale propagates throughout the entire face. Once again, this is a control that will be used fairly subtly. But just by using the X, you can get a fairly simple volume preservation and some squash and stretch. The good thing about that is all of the animation still rides on top of whatever global distortion we do to the head. Okay, it's very simple, just global squash and stretch that we've added to the head here, just at the basic skin cluster level. Once again, something that can be added on top of whatever animation you have going on the face. And with a little more weighting adjustment, we can make this look a lot better than it looks now. But once again, very simple, very fast deformation as well.